There she is.
That is a 40-plus-year-old fish. See you, big girl.
What is going on, guys? So I want to give y'all a breakdown on how to catch alligator gar from start to finish. You know, I've caught hundreds and hundreds of alligator gar, successfully catching, releasing, tagging them as well. I've caught 5 over 7 foot, so I'd say I'm pretty qualified to give y'all a breakdown on how to do this. And we're going to go through the rods, the reels, how to catch the fish, the hook sets, terminal tackle, etc. You know, I did one of these a couple years ago, so I want to give y'all a clean, concise version of how to safely catch and release these giants and hopefully get y'all on your next personal best. So without further ado, I want to start with the rods and the reels. So easy, you're going to want to look for heavy action rods. I use Denali bottom feeders, and yes, I have a promo code. I don't even care about that. I just use these rods, and I started using these rods years ago because they fit my needs perfectly. And that being, I fish still water. I live in Louisiana. A lot of our water is just completely stagnant. So this is a 7'10" rod. That allows me to get the line over the water column and get a strong hook set every time. So I'm gonna recommend anywhere from 7 foot up to 8 foot heavy action rod, preferably fast action as well. Alligator gar run with the bait. So they will pick up the bait and they'll run sometimes for a minute straight. So you need a rod that is not only long enough, but stout enough to get a good straight hook set on that fish. You don't want slack to be out in the water. So I'd say Denali, Ugly Stik, Hellcat rods, etc. I think Okuma have some good musky rods that can work for alligator gar as well. Any kind of catfish rod. But you want to make sure that you can catch an 8-foot fish because you never know when one's gonna bite. So I do the same thing for spinning and conventional. I use 7'10" heavy action. For the reels, you're gonna want a reel that not only can hold heavy pound test, but also has a live liner or a bait clicker. Now, what is a live liner or a bait clicker? I will show you. Essentially, it is an indicator on your reel that allows you to hear when you have a run or a bite, but it does not let that fish feel too much tension that it can drop it or realize that it's hooked. So this is crucial for alligator gar because alligator gar will take the bait and run with it. And I will show you actually the real alligator gar skull here in a second, how and why they do that. But for the reels, you're gonna wanna make sure it has something like this. It's loud, it lets you know when you have a fish. The fish can swim with the bait freely and not know that they have a hook in their mouth. And that's super, super important because alligator gar are very, very finicky. As soon as they feel weight, they're gonna drop it or they're gonna get hooked. It's the same thing for the spinning rod. So here I have an 8,000 size Penn Fierce live liner. This is kind of my go-to spinning reel. I'm not really much of a spinning reel guy. I prefer the conventional reels just because they give me a lot more power when I set the hook, etc. But spinning reels are good because they have a higher gear ratio. You can reel down fast. It's gonna be the same concept. You have a live liner instead of a bait clicker. It's the same thing, right? It lets that fish run and allows you to hear it. So you wanna make sure you either have a spinning reel that has a live liner or you make sure that you turn the drag down enough so that the fish can run and pull that line. Then when you're ready to set the hook, you tighten it back up. But for the size of the reels, I would recommend an 8,000 size if you're gonna go with Penn. That's their biggest for the Fierce. And I have on 130 pound test here. I'm gonna get into why I use that line and how to use different lines and tackle in a second. But you're gonna wanna make sure those reels, whether it's conventional or spinning, hold a lot of line and are big enough to properly fit onto the rod. So like I said, you want a heavy action rod, 7 foot to 8 foot. You want your reel to match in size. Now onto the terminal tackle, the line, hooks, leaders, weights, floats, etc. I've been using the same setup, terminal tackle wise, for probably 5 or 6 years. It has not failed me at all. I've caught some true giant fish, as you can see here. By now I'm pretty qualified to say that this rig is good, really, really good. And I've also caught 4 of my own tagged fish, so I know that it allows the fish to be released safely as well. Now, I'm gonna start with the line. So I've gone through a couple different lines throughout the years. I'm looking here, I got quite a few. As of the last 3 years, I've gone strictly with a 130 pound Suffix 832. Now, you don't necessarily need 130 pound, but it's not so much about the strength of the fish, but it's more so about the abrasion resistance of the line. So alligator gar oftentimes live in areas that are very snaggy. You got rocks, rebar, trees in the water, etc. But you need braided line in order to have a proper hook set. Alligator gar are very bony mouths. The trade-off with braided line, however, is it is very, very easy to snap as soon as it comes in contact with something, especially when there is tension in the line. So I, after trial and error, after many years, switched from Power Pro. Honestly, I'll never use Power Pro again. No hate on Power Pro, but I've had a horrible experience. I've used spider wire. Spider wire is pretty good. I've used quite a few different braided lines, but I just found that at this point in my fishing career, quote unquote, it would be disrespectful to myself to not allow myself to have the most optimal opportunity possible to catch a true giant fish if that opportunity to ever come about, you know? I mean, I don't want to lose a fish due to a tackle error when I got an 8-footer on my line. I mean, I've been grinding at this for years. That would be horrible. So that's why I go with the 130-pound test. It's just you never know when that true giant's going to bite. You never know when it's going to take you into a snag. And I'm pretty sure I saw online that Suffix 832 is the most durable braided line on the market. Don't quote me on that, but you can look it up. I'm pretty sure I'm right. So that's why I do that. And it's equivalent to maybe 25, 30-pound test mono. So you can get a ton of that on these reels, especially a big reel like this. This Penn Squall has probably 230 yards of line. So plenty enough to get a big fish. Now, like I said, I live in Louisiana. I live by a lot of stagnant water. I got the same rig I've been using for years. So depending on the depth of the water, I do move this, what I'm about to show you. This is rigging floss. So I tie a little bit of a uni knot, I would call it, onto this line, tighten it down. That allows my slip float to be modified. So if I'm fishing in, say, 6 feet of water, maybe I put it to about 12 feet, right? So I want my bait on the bottom. If I'm fishing in about 12 feet of water, I put it at about 20 feet. I'll tell you why in a second. But this can be moved up and down. You can use braided line as well, but I find the rigging floss tied straight into the line allows for it to be put tightly in place, but also moved when necessary. Once I put on the rigging floss, I go ahead and put on a bead that is also to keep our float from sliding over that rigging floss. So basically it's just your standard slip float. And again, I will explain why I do all this in a second. Under that bead, we have our slip float from Amazon. It was like 10 bucks for a pack of whatever, you know, they're cheap, but they slide perfectly over the line and they are a perfect indicator to see where that fish is. When you use a float for alligator gar, at least the way I do it, I'm not using the float to suspend my bait in the middle of the water column or on the surface or whatever. This is to show me where the fish is so that I can get an optimal hook set at the perfect time and know exactly where it is to allow me to get a straight hook set as well. So say a fish in 4 feet of water, right? Say I got a 6-foot gar eating on a mullet in 4 feet of water. And that gar is, you know, 12 feet away from my slip float. That gar's swimming down a canal or a bayou or whatever. I know exactly where that fish is and I know where I need to set the hook. Whereas if I'm fishing without a float and say that fish brings me around a little stick, right? What I'm seeing is my line going directly towards that stick and I set the hook straight ahead and this fish is down this way, right? So the float allows you to know exactly where that fish is, and it also is crucial, in my opinion, to prevent the hook from being swallowed too deep. You know where it is. You can see the chomps on the float when they bite. It's perfect, in my opinion, for catching these fish, and it's honestly a good way to see just how they behave. Under that, I have a rubber bead. You don't have to get a rubber bead, but I would definitely recommend a bead so that the float does not get caught on your knot, and it also protects your knot, because if that float, when you're casting, hits on your knot, it could damage it, and then you set the hook and it pops on a fish. So the bead is crucial. It allows that knot to be protected for the most part. Okay, now I'm gonna show y'all the knot that I use. Basically, it's a uni knot, but I go through the eye of the swivel twice. So I'm gonna go through one time, back through another time, and then I do a uni knot. So basically wow, this line is frayed. Actually, I need to change this. You take your line straight up, down, so you got a loop, and then you bring it back up, wrapping through the loop and the line itself. And you can find a picture of this on Google or whatever. It's really, really easy. But I've never seen anyone do it like this. But it's just what I've always done for gar. So I got it around the eye of the swivel twice. I always recommend wrapping it around the eye of the swivel twice. I just don't trust one single strand of braid on a hook set. And then you cinch it. And honestly, a lot of times I'll tie like just an overhand knot on that tag end just to allow it to stop on the knot if, worst case scenario, that line slips. So that will stop on the knot. And then for my leader, we have 550-pound test Dorisea braid off of Amazon. I started using this in I think late 2019. I think I was the first to use this for alligator gar. And I told some other people about it and it seemed to work for them and it always worked for me. So I'm glad I figured it out because it's cheap, it lasts a long time, and you don't have to worry about cutting wire and using crimps and all that. You literally just tie straight to the hook and you cut it when you need to. It's perfect. And it allows the fish to have a less intrusive foreign body in their throat in the case that you do have to cut the line. And I'm gonna touch on that as to why that happens in a second. But for my hook, I have been using 1/0 live bait hooks for, 6 years now. And I have caught giant fish on this. I'm talking 150 plus on these hooks. So every single gar on my channel is on a 1/0 live bait hook. If it's not, then maybe there's like 1 or 2 I call it as bycatch for something else. But basically this hook is so strong that people catch tuna on these, and it allows for you to not only have a perfect strong hook set for those giant fish, but if the fish swallows it, this is gonna create minimal harm. And honestly, the 4 fish that I recaptured that I had tagged before, I recaptured them a year later. All those fish swallowed the hook the first time and they were perfectly fine. These fish eat crabs, catfish, etc. And this tiny little hook is basically smaller than a catfish barb. So I know that as long as I use the methods that I do now for hook sets, drag on the reel, etc., that fish will be perfectly okay. And I will get into that in a second because it actually is crucial. But I've gone through quite a few different brands of these. I'm, trying a new one right now. My first 7-footer was on an H2O Express hook. Wouldn't really recommend those now because they bend a little bit, but the last 3 years and the giants that I've caught the last few years have been on the Owner Gorilla hooks. So these are by far the strongest 1/0 live bait hooks I've tried. Right here, I'm trying out this new one just because they've raised the price of these. And these are actually really cool looking. These blue wing hooks, they look awesome. I actually caught some fish this past weekend on them. They look great. So I'm really excited to try these, and knowing what I do now on how to work these fish, I'm perfectly fine with a little bit of bend in the hook because I know that the way I reel these fish in is not gonna result in a hook bending out completely. Because I had that happen in the past on a true giant, and it was really because my drag was too tight. So with alligator gar, they have such bony mouths that you have to let them run with the bait. And that drag being too tight one time killed one of my fish that I caught. And in that moment, I realized I don't need to horse these fish as much as I do. I don't need this drag to be locked down. And I kind of had to relearn some things. And not only did it help me provide better well-being for these fish and honestly a perfect catch and release ratio after the fact, but also resulted in me mouth hooking and catching more gar. So I'm gonna go through how these gar eat these baits and why I do what I do and how to do it in as simple explanation as possible. So I have an alligator gar skull here. This fish was 6'3". I found it dead. Sucks, but I got to bleach it and get a cool mount. So I didn't want it to go to waste. And I'm gonna show y'all how these fish eat and why these fish sometimes swallow the bait, how to prevent it, and what baits to use. So say I got an 8-inch mullet here, gar candy right there. Gar love mullet. Gar go all the way from freshwater out to the Gulf, and you can catch them off of oil rigs, right? They don't care if it's brackish or fresh or pretty soft. So they have a very wide variety of a diet because of that. So they eat carp, tilapia, shad, mullet, buffalo fish, hardhead catfish, gaff topsail catfish. Alligator gar's role in the ecosystem is to eat the weak and genetically inferior, keeping fish populations very healthy. There's a reason alligator gar filled lakes in Texas also have the largest largemouth bass. It's because if you remove the gar from the ecosystem, everything else collapses. So they are kind of like the cleanup crew. They keep everything perfect and in check and in balance. And if you look up north, alligator gar have been extirpated from a lot of their native range. And then it just so happens that the invasive carp from Asia or wherever, the big head and the silver carp have absolutely taken over. So they actually started reintroducing alligator gar because that's their role, is to clean up the fish that aren't supposed to be there and also the fish that are dying and have the weak genes. So cool little fish lesson. But yeah, say this is a mullet, right? Mullet are a perfect fish for gar, for bait. And what gar do, and this is why it's hard to catch them compared to other fish. It's extremely hard to catch gar compared to other fish because not only do they have extremely bony mouths, so if you're looking at this mouth here, like you see there's a pocket right here between the jaws, that's flesh. It is hard to hook though. So you have a very bony mouth. You do have little pockets in between these teeth. I've hooked to them a couple times there. The most of the time though, you're gonna hook that fish right here in the corner or they're gonna swallow it a little bit. That's not because you want them to swallow it, but it's because that's just where the skin is in the fish's mouth, right? That's why we use the tiny hooks, so they can be released just fine if they do. Now, that being said, never keep your drag too tight. So I'm gonna say that a couple times because like I said, I had a fish die, and it's not because the fish swallowed it, but it's because my drag was so tight that I like ripped that fish's guts out. And that was ago, and ever since then, I mean, dude, like, I've had so many fish be perfectly hooked with a looser drag as well as swim off super strong even if they swallow it. So say a gar is eating this mullet, and this is, you cast out a mullet, right? Just pretend this is a mullet. This gar is gonna pick this bait up and he's just gonna sit, right? Sometimes here in Louisiana, the gar will sit in place. I would say most of the time. They sit pretty still and then they start to swim. If you're in Texas and you're fishing a current, odds are that fish is gonna run. They're gonna go down the river, the bayou, whatever, you know, because you have a lot of current. If you're in Mississippi, that fish is probably gonna be pretty still for the most part. Mississippi and Louisiana gar, in my experience, are way, way slower than the videos I see people fishing in Texas. So it is kind of dependent on the area, but you can guarantee that the fish is gonna sit there with the bait in its mouth, and it's gonna try to get away from other predators, or it's gonna try to decide whether or not it even wants to eat it. So this fish is gonna be chomping the bait. So if you're using a slip float like I do, you'll see little hits in the float. That's the fish kind of moving this bait around, deciding whether or not it even wants to eat it. So I personally like to let the fish run anywhere between, I'd say 30 seconds to a minute and 30 seconds, depending on the area. Sometimes you have to set the hook and miss before you can realize how long they're eating. Whereas if you're fishing for like bass or catfish, you can set the hook instantly because they have flesh in their whole mouth that allows you to perfectly hook them regardless of how long they've had it. Gar are super tricky in that sense that if you set the hook early, you can catch them, but it's better to allow the fish to take the bait a little bit. Now onto the rigging. So you might be wondering how I use such a small hook and get that onto a bait and have it pull out and hook the fish. I will show you here in just a second. So actually I used rigging floss for years. And then I saw Peyton with Wildlife, his YouTube channel is Wildlife, y'all check him out, but he had a great idea of using cotton thread. And I was like, maybe that would allow for better hookups, right? Because not only does the cotton thread biodegrade once you're done fishing and it's out in the water or whatever, but it breaks like that. So not only is it safe for the environment, but it allows your bait to break away from the hook, allowing that hook to stay penetrated in the fish's mouth. So let me show you exactly how I rig these baits. So like I said, cotton thread has been a game changer for me. It's allowed me to get perfect hook sets, and basically the bait breaks away when the fish gets hooked, or when they jump, they'll shake the bait off. Whereas rigging floss was so strong, it caused me to lose a lot of fish. One fish I still think about to this day, it was so big, I couldn't believe it, and it jumped right in front of me, shook, and I watched that bait fly out of his mouth with the rigging floss connecting that hook to that bait. So this has been a game changer. Shout out Peyton Wildlife for this idea. Basically, I take a rigging needle. You can take a hook as well. You just put that on that hook or that rigging needle, and basically what you're gonna do is just put it through that bait. Say you're using a carp head, you put it through the lips. Use a mullet, you put it to the back, just whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. I like to do it towards the middle of the bait or that back, just because you don't know where that gar is gonna pick the bait up. So you want that hook to be somewhere in the middle and not on the teeth, because if the fish bites it on the tail, you know, and the fish has the tail down to his throat and the head's on the edge of the mouth and you set the hook, you're gonna lose it. So I like it to be somewhere in the middle. And what I do is literally just tie a few overhand knots. Like sometimes just two. Like I'll just do two right here. Cut it. And then basically what you have is a bait hanging from cotton thread with a perfect loop. And this allows for maximum exposure of that hook as well as a good hook set. But there's one crucial thing that you need to remember when hooking a bait like this. Basically you take your 1/0 live bait hook, you spin it, go under the loop. That's gonna make that loop smaller, getting that hook closer to that bait. You're gonna go under the loop again. And this is so crucial. You're gonna wanna keep doing that until there's quite literally zero air whatsoever between that rigging floss and that bait. You don't want that hook to even be able to move, because if you have a space between the bait and the hook and that fish has that bait in its throat, that hook can swing freely. For example, let me show you. If that hook is like this, right, it's far away from that bait, and that fish bites the bait and it's got it in its throat right here, that hook can swing freely and perfectly penetrate the gills. That is the last thing you want. It doesn't necessarily always kill the fish, but it will make them bleed, and it could risk killing the fish. So you do not want to hook their gills. You want to make sure that hook is perfectly against the bait, because I'll show you here, right? Say this fish has this bait right here, and you see this hook is perfectly against that bait. Wherever that bait is, that's where the hook's gonna be when you set the hook. But if you got that hook swinging around like crazy, it can go anywhere and it's probably gonna hook the gills. And I learned the hard way when I first started using this rig like 5 or 6 years ago, that I was gill hooking a lot of fish when I was letting that hook swing away from the bait. So that is crucial. I learned that early on, but I mean, it truly is super important. But I swear, man, these 1-aught light bait hooks allow for just such a great catch and release ratio. It leaves these fish strong and healthy. You know, here in Louisiana, we have a problem with just endless jug lines. I mean, we have no limits on jug lines. There's 0 regulations on the take of alligator gar, and you could go out somewhere and see 100+ jug lines in one spot. It crushes them. It's sad, especially with those jug lines. They have giant treble hooks on them, giant double J hooks, and I've caught so many alligator gar with those hooks sticking out of their stomach and wire hanging out of their mouth. So it's kind of my mission to not only bring awareness to these fish, but also provide methods that allow for catching and releasing these giants and allowing them to swim off strong to live another day, you know? But that's pretty much it, man. I mean, there's a lot of places you can catch alligator gar, but they can be very hard to find. If you're in Louisiana, I mean, there's so many places you can find them. It's just really hard to find big ones because we don't have limits. If you're in Texas, you're in the gold mine, you got gar all over, giant gar, because y'all got protections on them. My mission here in Louisiana is to get at least a size limit. I mean, I've been watching my whole life people just hate and slaughter these fish. They don't understand that they're native. They don't understand their role in the ecosystem. And because of that, it's really hard to see people catch these giant gar in other states. And it's just almost impossible here, man. I mean, I've caught 5-7 footers, and I know that if I lived in Mississippi or Texas, it'd be a lot more than that. So, you know, at the end of the day, my goal is to help these fish. I love our ecosystem here in Louisiana. I love our state, but I just want to help others understand these fish's role, that they are important in our ecosystem. They're also fun to catch. A lot of people hate gar just because they're told to hate gar by passed down misinformation. So really, at the end of the day, it's all about protecting our fish. If you want to see change here in Louisiana, I have over 1,000 signatures on a petition to get a size limit or just any kind of limit on these fish here. I see the narrative starting to change. And you know, I grew up on a bayou that had these giant fish, but I didn't have anybody telling me what fish were trash and what weren't. All fish were just fish. And I'm living proof that in that scenario, if you don't have somebody infiltrating your mindset towards certain wildlife, you just see it as wildlife. I'm kind of doing this video because I couldn't fish this weekend, and also it's raining like crazy. I apologize for the loud fish tank. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I want to see y'all catch and release these fish. I want to see the gar narrative change here. I want to see change overall with this fish, and hopefully have these giants roam again like they once did before all the jug lines and the bow fishing like they do now in Texas and Mississippi. So that's gonna do it. Hope you guys learned something from this video. My boat is still in the shop, so next weekend we're gonna see what we're doing. I don't even know yet, but like I said, hope you guys took something from this, and I'll see y'all in the next fishing video.